All right, so we're dealing with Donald Trump's indictment and how it relates to the 2024 campaign. Donald Trump's going to be in court today at 4 p.m. in Washington, D.C. And Kevin, despite being indicted on these 4 federal charges related to these efforts to overturn the 2020 election and facing 78 felony charges in 3 separate cases, he's still a leading figure in the Republican primary election. He is by far and away the leading candidate.
I cannot believe we're going to watch a former president of the United States walk into a courtroom and be charged with crimes that could lock him up for decades. Half the country thinks this is all political. I mean, it makes me want to sit down with my kids and say, you should really go into politics. I'd really love it if you got into politics. You know, start locally, then run at the state level, and maybe one day you could run for president of the United States. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, right.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I don't know. I don't know I don't know what I'm watching. I don't know what's going on in this world. Let's get Roshini Rajkumar, political strategist, host of the Crisis Files podcast in. Good morning, Roshini. How are you? Oops, we did not contact Roshini yet. Laura's going to do that real quick. That'll give us a couple of minutes time to talk a little bit more about this. I mean, when you look at the public perception of what's happening out here, I mean, what do you think the American people are saying to themselves when the president and the front runner to be president again is walking into a courtroom?
I think that Americans are wise, and they're wisening up if they weren't knowledgeable about this fact a couple years ago, that this is so tainted in terms of the way we run our elections and the way we operate our Department of Justice. And in my eyes, it's just obvious that this is a political persecution, if you want to call it that, or a prosecution of a political opponent. That's the way it appears. And you can see this serious charges against Trump. Sure, they're serious charges, but we got some serious accusations against the current president of the United States as well.
All right, let's bring Roshini Rajkumar in, political strategist and host of the Crisis Files. Good morning, Roshini. How are you?
Good morning, gentlemen. It's great to be with you. Wow, just, the headlines just keep rolling here.
Doesn't this make you want to sit down and tell your kids to go into politics and one day you could become president and go to prison?
It kind of makes me need a stiff drink is what it makes me need.
Right, I know. Tom and I were just talking, what do you think the public is saying? Is half the country saying no one's above the law, good for Merrick Garland and good for, this prosecution, and the rest is saying this is political garbage? How are we going to put an end to this? How can I ever trust the FBI or the Justice Department? Or can people just walk by and not even pay attention that the former president and current frontrunner to be president is going into a courtroom to be arraigned on a case that could put him away for decades?
Well, partly what's so hard with this situation is it is stunning to me to believe anyone who has all these charges against them is running for president and then at the same time is winning in the polls on the GOP side. I mean, it's so hard for this political science major and lover of the Constitution since about 5th grade. Like, I can't even imagine back in grade school and high school or even in my early days as a TV reporter that we could have been covering a candidate who is having all this, as well at the same time, as Tom pointed out, a sitting president who has all these accusations flying against him. Like, it just seems like I'm in a completely different world. So that is fundamentally an issue with what's happening in our country. And it does seem, guys, like the American people have said, we're going to go on with our lives. Election day will come, and we don't really care what the courts or the media are saying.
I could not imagine being a political science professor right now and having a classroom of students, and I'm going to explain to them how government works and the public trust in institutions. It's just hard to wrap my head around where this country is at right now. You have many people believing that the Department of Justice is protecting Joe Biden by giving his son an unbelievable plea deal and going after conservatives like Donald Trump, no matter what, how weak the evidence is. I mean, how do you get around that?
This is what's really hard for me, especially as a lawyer. We are not supposed to politicize. When you're investigating or there are allegations, let's just start with allegations, you really do have to find a statute. You really do have to find something that has elements of a crime and have a really strong sense that you could prosecute and succeed. It can't be because of what one party or another or one action group or another is saying about a person. It just that cannot sway. You know, if we go back to the pre-civil rights era where, my gosh, there were so many things that many people of color were charged with, convicted of, hung for, that now we look back and say, oh my gosh, that was so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like we're in that again, just in another layer of that. But the rule of law doesn't seem to have any meaning. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I am pretty floored by everything we're saying. And all I can hope is that the judges out there, no matter what comes in front of them in court, that the judges will be the ones to say, okay, this is not how we're interpreting the law. So that's where I'm holding some hope.
Yes, and I think it's wise to put on your attorney hat here and try to figure out the legalities of this. And is there any precedent or is there any basis for these allegations? And I do not like the partisan nature of how people look at Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. But the thing to me, though, is I'm really trying to look at this, let's say the Trump indictment, specifically this one right now. Is there something in this that was truly criminal about what he did, whether it was pressuring Mike Pence to not vote and to not count these electoral votes as legitimate and to throw them out? And there was tremendous pressure for Mike Pence. Is that illegal? It may have been wrong, but was it criminal for him to do that? Or these alternate slate of electors, or all these different things, the verbiage he used. And I can't find, I mean, I'm not an attorney, you are, but I've seen it happen before. I saw it happen in 2017 and 2016. Is it criminal, do you think? Just pull off the partisan hat, not that you are partisan, but the political lens. Is this a clear-cut criminal case that is easily going to be prosecuted?
It is not clear-cut. And part of why I say that is because it has taken so long and so many different bites at the same apple to get to where we are today. Look, I mean, we are talking about things connected to the 2020 election. And here we are rounding out the second half of 2023, and this is still being looked into. I mean, everything that I was taught in law school, yeah, you have to dig up evidence and those kinds of things and make sure you have good connections and be clear about it. But it shouldn't take 3 years to come up with charges. That's suspect just on its face. I don't care who the person is that's involved or the people involved. So that's suspect. That's something that we need to think about as American people. And then you also have to look at, you know, a lot of the country, or I would say a lot of the Trump supporters, don't seem to care. So that in itself makes me wonder, are all of those people not law-abiding people? I think they are law-abiding people. So they have decided we really don't believe there's any truth in all of this. So what's the end result? You've heard me say, and this is a line I lived by when I was a TV reporter, follow the money. When you follow the money, you'll see why people do what they do. Well, the reporters need to follow the money on what's happening on the Biden side, too.
Yeah.
So if the journalists out there and the courts out there can really apply everything, their opinions as well as the law equally, to Biden and Trump, then I can give everybody credibility. But right now, there are a lot of legal mistakes happening, and that's disappointing for me.
It is. And you can also pay attention to the actual, you know, talk about the Biden case, the actual business partners who had a lot of very, I think, credible witness testimony that they've given before Congress and even to the FBI. Maybe reporters should pay attention to that as well. Always appreciate your perspective. Roshini Rajkumar, political strategist and host of the Crisis Files podcast. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, guys.